Apple and OpenAI may have just turned from partners into courtroom rivals. Google is publicly admitting a gap in one of AI's hottest markets, and protesters marched through San Francisco asking the biggest AI labs to stop racing ahead. Today is July 12th, 2026, and this is a quieter Sunday news window, so we are not forcing weak stories into the lineup. We have three stories that matter: a serious Apple lawsuit against OpenAI, Sundar Pichai's comments about Google trailing in agentic coding, and a new San Francisco protest targeting OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google DeepMind. The biggest story is Apple versus OpenAI. Apple has filed a federal lawsuit accusing OpenAI, IO products, and two former Apple employees of misappropriating trade secrets connected to hardware development. The lawsuit names Tang Tan, now OpenAI's chief hardware officer, and Chang Liu, a former Apple electrical engineer. According to Associated Press reporting, Apple says former employees accessed or retained confidential material and that OpenAI encouraged Apple recruits to share sensitive hardware information. That is the allegation, not a court finding. OpenAI denies interest in competitors' trade secrets. A spokesperson told AP the company is still reviewing the filing and said OpenAI remains focused on building innovative technology. Business Insider separately reported July 11th expert reaction to the case, with lawyers and analysts saying the lawsuit is less about normal employee movement and more about alleged conduct, retained devices, unauthorized access, supply chain information, and interview practices. This is not just legal drama. Apple and OpenAI were partners when Apple integrated ChatGPT into its products. Now Apple is saying OpenAI's hardware push may be built on stolen know-how. If the case advances, it could affect OpenAI's consumer device timeline, future Apple integrations, and the rules around hiring from competitors. For viewers, the practical takeaway is simple. The AI race is moving from software models into physical devices, and that makes trade secrets, supply chains, and hardware talent much more important. Next, Google CEO Sundar Pichai has acknowledged that Google is behind in agentic coding. Times of India reported on July 11th that Pichai, speaking on the Hard Fork podcast, said Google is a bit behind when it comes to agentic coding with tool use, instruction following, and long-horizon tasks. Agentic coding means software tools that do more than suggest code. They can plan, use tools, make changes, run checks, and keep working toward a larger programming goal. The reported context matters. Pichai argued Google is still strong across text, multimodality, voice, and reasoning, but he pointed to product surface as a problem. Anthropic has Claude Code. OpenAI has Codex. Google has been pushing anti-gravity and Gemini coding tools, but Pichai's point appears to be that having a model is not enough. You also need the workflow where developers actually live. AI coding is one of the clearest places where AI is already tied to budgets and productivity. Businesses can measure whether tools ship code faster, reduce repetitive work, or introduce bugs. Pichai's admission is important because it shows the competition is now about execution, not just benchmark slides. Ordinary viewers should care because coding agents are becoming a preview of broader workplace agents, tools that do multi-step tasks inside real software rather than just answering questions in a chat box. Finally, about 200 people marched in San Francisco on July 11th from OpenAI toward Anthropic and Google DeepMind, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. The protest was organized by Stop the AI Race and called for a pause on new frontier model training. Protesters raised concerns about job disruption, housing pressure, environmental costs, and existential risk. The Chronicle's reporting says protesters included students, AI workers, and longtime San Franciscans. Some called for a global agreement to pause larger or more general frontier model training. Others focused on local regulation and data center impacts. The Wall Street Journal also published a same-day feature on hardline anti-AI activism, showing that the protest movement is becoming more visible and more complicated. Whether you agree with the protesters or not, public pressure is becoming part of the AI business environment. AI companies are competing for talent, compute, enterprise customers, and now political legitimacy. That affects regulation, local approvals for infrastructure, and public trust. The practical change is not that models stop tomorrow. It is that big labs increasingly have to explain safety, energy use, and community impact in plain language. The pattern today is clear. AI is no longer just a product race. It is a legal race, a workflow race, and a public trust race. Apple is trying to defend hardware secrets as OpenAI moves toward devices. Google is trying to catch up where coding agents are turning into real products. And activists are trying to slow the whole industry down before the next frontier model cycle. Which story do you think will have the biggest impact? Apple's lawsuit, Google's coding agent gap, or the protests against frontier AI? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for your daily AI update.